You've learned something if you've got this far, so subscribe.
Range of motion matters.
Oh, every inch counts. Though we all know it.
It's the only time when you can do something about it.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, it's true. It's true.
Right.
It's true. It's very true. Do you know what? Range of motion is one of those, and I always, when I talk about parameters of a lift, when it comes to progressing load, there's parameters I like to stick by, and the tempo is one, and the range of motion is the second. And of course, we need to differentiate joint range of motion and active range of motion. You know, these are things again that come with time, with experience, with something I teach my clients. That's why I'm always a big fan of videos, so I can analyze these things. But yeah, it's amazing how range of motion can slip when load increases, and I think that tends to be one of those biggest parameters. But there's a lot of literature in favor of muscle hypertrophy being in its greatest inner lengthened range, and that tends to be the range which most people skimp on. Both ranges, people tend to skip on that. But I'll tell you what, the prime kit at Graftism, where you can load shortened and lengthened ranges, and if you are advanced with that equipment, it is unbelievable, right? I've seen people fully load the lengthened range and then not use the lengthened range, like stop short of the lengthened range. Yeah, right. So do you see what I'm trying to say? It's like it's skipping out on the range of motion that matters the most. Yeah, and this just goes back to ego lifting. Why would you compromise that range of motion? It's either too heavy that you can't physically get it, which means you need to lighten the load, or your ego is leading the show, which means you need to lighten the load.
Yeah, I think when you look around a gym, yes, you can see a lot of things which you should probably do, but I think when it comes to range of motion, especially with certain lifts, you see what people don't do, and you want to avoid what people don't do. And people tend to avoid the hardest part of the lift, right? So all the way down to the bottom of a squat, the bar to get a hard touch on the chest at the bottom of a bench press. People will avoid that. Why? Because it's the hardest. But in those two particular lifts, those are the stretch is the most important part of the lift. So yeah, you've got to take the muscle through the full range of motion. Otherwise, later on, there's going to be glaring gaps in your strength, and at some point you will hit a plateau. You won't be able to progress anymore because you've not addressed your weak links.
Agreed. And you're talking about as well, if we think about bicep in a lengthened position, we have to think like tendon strength, joint strength. We need to think about these things that then just aren't getting any load in that stretched range of motion at all, because you're just falling short of it. So yeah, it makes no sense, and it's probably one of the biggest things I see. Is probably one of the biggest things, even in my own clients' training videos. When we start progressing load, it's like, whoa, what happened to range of motion? Yeah. And then it's amazing, sometimes people don't notice it, and this is probably one of the biggest advantages of filming sets, because we talk about rep standardization and the importance of it. Well, that's a perfect opportunity. How do you know what you feel you're doing? How many times have you watched back using a different example? How many times have you watched back a lift that felt grindy? And it goes and it moves flipping smooth. Speed rep, right? Because 100%. You're in that moment of exertion, you're not really noticing it. And I wonder if the same thing happens with range of motion.
Yeah, I've noticed it with me. And I'll be honest. At times, especially if you end up lifting a weight that you perhaps haven't earned the right to lift yet, is you stop just short of where the fear comes in, doesn't it? So, and you look at it back, and then you go, oh, you know what? You own up to that, and then you correct it the next time out. But yes, you got to take the muscle through the full range of motion.
Agree, 100%.
Without doubt.
Range of motion
matters.